Hey everybody, welcome to the Midnight Mystery School. Thought I would just get on here and do a quick response to Nosferatu. That last video that I did talking about how it was lost media, um, some people liked it. Some people on social media, were like, well, that's pretty obvious. What did you think of the movie? So, tell you what I thought about the movie. The movie was a little bit of a mixed bag for me. I really like the way Eggers typically directs. I think The Witch is a masterpiece. I think The Lighthouse is even better. Thought Northmen was maybe a little bit going in the wrong direction. I don't necessarily think that as a big budget filmmaker, he has found a healthy medium between what the distinct style, the sort of like more immersive theatrical kind of style that he had in previous films to Northman, and what he was working on that epic scale with Northman, really landed for me. There was a very, very interesting opening act, and then it sort of kind of rolled away from there. So that's subjective. I mean, I'm basing that on a little bit of my background, not only as a filmmaker, but, I was also for over a decade a curator at one of the world's top film festivals. I was an executive at a multi-Oscar winning production company here in Los Angeles. I'm still a Television Academy member and Emmy voter. I've lectured at USC. I've lectured at Juilliard. I've lectured at UCLA. I was faculty at Columbia Chicago, great film school. So, some of the criticisms that I make are not coming from a place of being uninformed about things. So when I jumped into Nosferatu, one of the things that really stood out to me was that the cinematography is fantastic. I went to go see it with my wife, who is a great special effects person. I went with a friend of hers who is a costumer. I went with another friend of mine who is an editor. So we all kind of saw it at the late night show here in Los Angeles, and everybody liked their own individual piece of it. On the whole, the audience that I saw it with was laughing a little bit at like Count Orlok's mustache. He looked a little bit like Dietrich Bader from Office Space. He had the big mutton chops, right? And maybe that broke some of the internal logic of the film a little bit for me, because I understand, well, he's a supernatural creature and he's based on Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Tepes, and obviously I'm very familiar with the folklore of, Vlad the Impaler and Elizabeth Bathory, and obviously I know the story of Dracula very well. I have a narrated version of Dracula if you want to check it out here, right here, yeah, boing. There's, the entire full novel as narrated by me, and it's here on the stream. But I think that you have to start making cinematic choices, and we all, as was recently made very popular during the last election cycle, exist in context. And the context that we exist in is one where that big bushy mustache that looks a little bit like Tom Jane in Boogie Nights was making the audience laugh. I don't think that was the reaction that Eggers wanted to put out. He wanted to be authentic. He wanted it to be like, well, if there was this Eastern European aristocracy, it was very fashionable for him to have that kind of a mustache at the time. Well, sometimes we have to sacrifice accuracy for the semiotics that you're trying to convey. I'm always a big fan of Nick Holt. I think Nick Holt is a fantastic actor, but if you're going to hire him to be like a foppish dandy, right, let the man cook. I think that he was actually a little bit more restrained in this movie than he usually is. And I really like him in period pieces. I like him in The Great. Liked him in The Favorite. I think he's phenomenal in a lot of these roles. But unfortunately, we, in this particular role, felt a little held back from his more comedic, quick-witted performances. And I think having him be a little bit more like the stock kind of Nick Holt character that we're familiar with would have elevated the difference between the animal magnetism of Orlok and his character. Aaron Taylor Johnson was, I understand his position as being stoic, but and I felt like it was I felt like he wasn't particularly engaged. It felt very surface level, and maybe that's just the him trying to convey the period and the separation. Even though he has a great love for his children, he's very restrained in that love. But again, we exist in a contextual world where a more literal interpretation of some of these kinds of stories is going to fall flat, maybe with a mainstream audience, because you need to bridge that gap a little bit between the time periods. And I think being a slave to the authenticity of these time periods in the way that people engaged with one another may sometimes serve as a detriment to the overall film. I felt like the last act of the film was a bit rushed. It had a really nice, slow burning kind of pace. The first act was richly textured. I loved what they were doing with the Romany village and the entire sequence where they're at night going through the forest, and they're going to be performing this ritual, and the whole thing felt very Eggers. The same way in the first act of Northman, there's that great sequence where they go underground and Willem Dafoe is there and they do the hallucinogenics, and it telegraphs a much more interesting film to come. So everything right up until maybe the introduction of Orlok to me felt spot on. Then the movie kind of dragged a little bit, and then the resolution felt like it wrapped up very quickly. Some of the things that I have criticisms of are things that I find are more about Nosferatu itself. As an adaptation of Dracula, they made a decision to sort of split Van Helsing into two characters. So you have one character who's running the asylum, who's very much the man of science, the trusted person that they're going to, and then you have Willem Dafoe playing, this other more eccentric mentor to that character that was very definitively steeped in the world of the esoteric and magic and mysticism and all that sort of thing. He recognizes some of the symbols which are not real. When I say real, that's a loaded word, but they're not occult symbols that are recognizable as anything very specific from history, although they are similar to the Seals of Solomon kind of grimoire iconography. It was well researched as something that could have existed. So that's kind of a cool detail. The person handling that element of the production design did very well on that. But Willem Dafoe's character is this sort of later half Van Helsing, and his student is the first half Van Helsing, and they've taken this Van Helsing character and split it into two people. So now you don't have a single person with a character arc. You have two people that sort of hand off the role of leadership halfway through. They pass the baton. So that was kind of interesting on my end, because normally, you like to see characters with some kind of development and arc. And it almost seemed like Eggers was going for an anti-arc kind of piece. Like everyone stays in a relatively static position. So Lily Rose Depp as the lead, she says that this darkness has always sort of been within me. It's part of me. It's always been around, and I called out to him. Well, the movie ends in a way where that is kind of justified. It's saying yes, this was always an intimate part of you. You did not really have anything outside of that predetermination. There's no free will for you to exercise. So you look at Nick Holt's character, and he doesn't really change throughout the picture. He's just slavishly devoted to his wife, loves his wife, will do anything for the wife. Willem Dafoe's character doesn't change because his character arc has been split into two people, as we just discussed. And if you look at Aaron Taylor Johnson, there's almost this great active denial of change, because they reach a certain point where, this plague that's going through the city is being, talked about in supernatural terms, and he just can't come to grips with it. And he says, no, I'm a man of reason. I'm a man of science. I'm a ship merchant, and I believe in the material concrete world. He's confronted with the reality of the supernatural in this universe, in this context, and what does he do with it? He goes and kills himself. He performs an act of necrophilia, and ultimately does himself in, because he cannot change. So there's this overarching message to the film that you are what you are. A leopard can't change its stripes. And I don't know if I personally believe in that philosophy. I think that that was well executed if you're looking at it through the lens of ritual and prophecy and saying that there is a prophecy and it will be fulfilled and it is the only way for this to resolve. They give you the rules to the game up front. And if you follow those rules, then uh, the the resolution will come. And they kind of almost without the Greek chorus are telegraphing that to us in a very specific way. And Eggers did that well. I don't think a lot of audiences are going to accept that storytelling. It's going to really divide people because we are accustomed to our characters changing over time and learning something, having the conflict um, reveal new things about the nature of the characters that we're invested in. And this doesn't allow for that. Do I like it as much as Herzog's Nosferatu? Not really. Do I like it as much as Bram Stoker's Dracula? Probably a little bit less. Part of me feels like Coppola was able to take the cinematic elements of Nosferatu, combine them with the literary elements of Dracula, and craft something that's sort of an Ouroboros of storytelling in a very interesting and dynamic way. And I recently rewatched it. It still feels fresh and engaging. Some people don't like the film. You know, that's your prerogative. Everything is subjective. So I don't think that this entry into the vampire canon does much different or adds anything new to the equation. Do I think you should see it? Yes, I think the film is beautifully realized. I think it's an adaptation of Nosferatu. I think it just kind of starts and ends there. There's nothing transcendent about it. But I do think that it's interesting, and I think it's worth taking a look at. Ultimately, the facial hair joke about Orlok and the handlebar mustache thing. Yes, I mean we're very familiar with renderings of Vlad the Impaler and paintings of the era and the styles of Middle European and Eastern European dress in the time period. But at the same time, you really just some of it breaks the internal logic of the film. The idea of that being that the rest of Orlok is this decaying corpse-like creature, bald head, decaying fingernails, the whole thing. The only thing that seems to be alive and still affixed to him is this gigantic, lush mustache. So it seems out of place. It seems a little bit strange. We're not used to seeing vampires that look like that. So people in the theater that I was with, they kind of laughed at it a little bit, and I did think he looked a little bit funny, but you kind of get over that a little bit. I think that Orlok was maybe, especially at the end, the shot that's from a top-down POV at the very end of the film. I think that he looked very much like the renderings of death and the plague that you would see from the Middle European periods, and it was very much inspired by like a danse macabre kind of imagery, which again was very well researched. And I did enjoy it. I liked the film. I think it's a little bit of light criticism for all of its faults. I still think that people should see it and like it. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me today, and I hope to see you out there.